Part 131. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1301. Man Bao felt that the reason why she was shorter than Bai Shan and Bai Erlang was because she had to memorize more things than them. Of course, Bai Shan disagrees with this point, because he has a lot to remember. Especially after entering Qiaozixiu, their courses have increased a lot. Some courses can't even be taught by Mr. Zhuang, so they can only learn from the doctors in Qiaozixiu. As the exam is approaching, there are more things to memorize, that is, Bai Erlang has to stay in school for a while after school, let alone Bai Shan. Yin Or just exhausted his mind and fell ill. This time, Man Bao needed to visit the doctor. She gave him an injection, and then said, "Don't consume too much mind." Mrs. Yin immediately persuaded, "Yes, Kilang, you are already very good if you can study, and the family doesn't need you to earn fame, so there is no need to waste your energy." Sister Yin and the others who heard that my younger brother was ill and ran back to her mother's house nodded repeatedly, and tried to persuade her. The meaning was obvious. If you fell ill again, what would they do? Fourth Sister Yin and Fifth Sister Yin were already talking about kissing, and they were about to settle down. At this time, he fell ill, which was not good for them. Yin Or remained silent, but Man Bao felt that he was also very powerful, so his face didn't change at all after being so noisy. She doesn't like being so verbose when she persuades others. She prescribed a prescription, and said a word to him when she packed up her things and left, "Don't look around." Yin, who had been silent all this time, nodded after thinking about it. After 3 days at home, he would not go to the academy as hard as Bai Shan and the others. He just attends class well, and after class, after finishing the homework assigned by the teacher, he reads the books he is interested in. As for whether he can memorize all the texts in class, he doesn't insist. Occasionally, I have to go around the garden, pull the branches or grab the leaves that can still grow on the trees. When he turned around and returned to the classroom, Bai Shan was still holding a book and reading silently with his eyes half closed. He glanced over and saw that most of the people in the classroom had already left, so he walked over and knocked on his desk. Asked, "When you were in the government school before, did you work hard every time you took the exam?" Bai Shan recited it silently twice in his heart, and after confirming that he had memorized this paragraph, he pressed the textbook and looked up. "I will work harder, but I won't work this hard, because when I was in the government school, I didn't need to do this to be among the best." Yin might be curious, is it important to be at the top? Bai Shan tilted his head, "Isn't it important to be at the top?" Yin Or shook his head after thinking about it. "I've thought about it for the past 2 days, and I don't think it's that important." So he didn't rob them. Bai Shan closed his eyes and meditated, "It's very important. Anyway, I don't want to be inferior to others, and I'm not stupid than them. Besides, I want to take the Jinshi examination as soon as possible." Yin Ru said, "What are you doing in such a hurry? You are still young." "It's not too young. Didn't Master Yang take the Jinshi examination at the age of 17? Yin laughed, "Are you competing with Senior Yang? Do you know that he is a well-known talent in the capital?" "I know. By the way, Xiaomu, tomorrow, Mr. Tang is hosting us in his garden, and Mr. Yang will also be there. Do you want to go?" Yin Or was stunned for a moment and then asked, "Is it bad to come to the door rashly?" "Bai Shandao, Master Yang and Master Tang both know you. It's all right. If you want to go, we will take you there." Yin Or became pensive. If Xiang Mingxiu was the later idol, then Yang Heshu was the person Yin Or had always admired, and Magistrate Tang was the person he had always admired. Of course, before Yin was weak, he only saw them twice from a distance, and didn't even say a word, but he knew them from his sisters a lot. Especially his 2 older sisters are about the same age as the 2 of them, and they have also had a crush on them. It's a pity that except for the eldest sister, they are all concubines, and they only dare to get together to discuss secretly, and dare not mention this marriage. He used to be sick, and his sisters liked to gather around him to talk, and he often heard them praise the two of them. So Yin hesitated for a moment, then nodded in response. Bai Shan was also straightforward, nodded and said, "Okay, then we will turn around the corner and pick you up at your house tomorrow? Or do you go by yourself?" "I'll go by myself, we made an appointment to meet outside the door." Bai Shan nodded. Tang He, Yang Heshu and the others have been back for a while, but they have not had time to get together with them, mainly because they are busy, and Bai Shan and the others are not free. This time I finally found time to come here. First, because they were finally not so busy. Second, they estimated that Bai Shan and the others would return to their hometowns soon, so they found it time for everyone to get together. In the evening, there was another heavy snowfall in the capital. Man Bao pushed open the door and felt the cold air coming from the pavement. He couldn't help taking a long breath before exhaling. After rubbing her hands, she entertained herself by jumping into the snow and stepping on it a few times. Hearing the creaking sound of the snow, she happily carried the wooden basin to the back kitchen to fetch hot water for washing. After she left, Bai Shan also came out yawning. The two of them washed and changed. One went to knock on Bai Erlang's door, and the other fetched water to help Mr. Zhuang wash up. After they had finished their breakfast, they read another paragraph, and seeing that the appointed time was approaching, they ran back to the house and took out the newly made fox fur capes, and after putting them on, they ran out happily. Mr. Zhuang watched the three of them run away happily, shook his head with a smile, and said loudly, "Come back soon." The three of them responded from a distance, and had already run to the front yard and got into the carriage. Man Bao's fox fur is white, and the fox fur given by the queen is used. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang are gray. Man Bao also has the same one, but the material is not given by Zhou Lang, but old man Lu. People bought it made for them. The material is also very good, much better than Zhou Hulang's batch of leather goods. Bai Erlang looked at the white on her body with some jealousy. "Why don't you wear the same clothes as us?" Man Bao said, "White looks better in snowy weather." Bai Shan glanced at her, looked away, couldn't help but glance at her again, with an uncontrollable smile on his face, nodded and said, "It's pretty." Bai Erlang glanced at him, turned his head away with her eyes, and said, "But the three of us are together, you should wear the same clothes as us, just like when we go to school, we all wear the same clothes." Man Bao said, "I don't want to go to school. When I go back to my hometown, I will wear gray clothes, which are resistant to dirt." Bai Shan nodded, "Not bad." Bai Erlang glared at him, and decided not to speak. Anyway, now Zhou Man can say whatever Bai Shan says. When they arrived at the Tang mansion, the Yin family's carriage was already waiting there. Seeing them getting out of the carriage, Yin Ju stepped on the horse stool as well. He is also wearing a big coat, coincidentally, it is also gray. He stepped forward on the creaking snow, and Daji had already knocked on the door with the post, and the servants of the Tang mansion quickly opened the door to welcome them in, saying, "Mr. Yang and Mrs. Yang are here too, honored guests, please come inside." The next update will be around 11 o'clock in the evening. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1302. Tang He and the others went to Yuanzikao to pick them up after hearing the report from their servants. When the two sides met, they couldn't help showing bright smiles on their faces. Yang Heshu also had a warm smile on his face. Kui tilted his head to see it, relaxed his heart, and smiled slightly. Yin went up to greet them with a slightly red face. Both Yang Heshu and Tang He knew him. Of course, they only regarded him as Yin Li's son before, knowing that he might not live to be an adult because of his frail health. But before they were still in Mianzhou and Yizhu, they had received letters from Manbao and the others, from which they knew the grievances between them, and after returning to Beijing, they also knew that they were not acquaintances now. Tang He didn't ask Bai Shan and the others why they brought him, but directly welcomed his arrival, and then asked about his physical condition. Yan may say that she is much better. Several people went to the garden while talking. Mrs. Tang dragged Man Bao and Kui Shi to fall behind. Mrs. Tang glanced at the fox fur on her body, and said with a smile, "Your cloak is pretty." Man Bao said, "The fox fur is a gift from the queen." "No wonder the hair color is so pure," Mrs. Tang said with a smile, "now you are a celebrity in the palace." Man Bao shook his head, "It's just seeing a doctor, but there are indeed many rewards. Although people in the palace don't like to give gold and silver, the cloth and other things they give are still very valuable if sold. It's a pity that Lejun doesn't like to help her sell cloth now. She said that those brocades are hard to buy even if they have money, and they will lose money if they sell them when they are not in a hurry to use the money. In this regard, Manbao is not as good as her, so she always entrusts the fabrics to her for storage." Manbao turned his head and glanced at Mrs. Kui, saw that she had been looking at Yang Heshu who was walking in front of her, and asked, "Madam Kui, I think Mrs. Yang is much thinner than before, and her complexion is not very good looking, is she sick?" Kui immediately withdrew her gaze, nodded earnestly and said, "My husband's appetite is not very good, and he caught a cold some time ago. Fortunately, he has been in good health, otherwise, the wind and cold can easily kill people. But he is busy with work, even if he is sick, he can't stop his work. I would like to ask Dr. Zhou if he has any prescriptions for healthcare. The medicine is 3-point poisonous. Now that you are cured, you should stop taking the medicine." Manbao thought for a while and said, "But you can take the medicine." Speaking of this, Manbao became happy, and she said proudly, "I have a new apprentice, she is a medical girl, she knows a lot of prescriptions for medicinal food, I will find some for you later, and you can adjust it for Master Yang." Manbao likes to exchange medical skills with others, and Dr. Lu obviously wants to repay Manbao, knowing that she likes to collect all kinds of prescriptions, including but not limited to prescriptions. As for medical women, they are the best at medicinal food. Not only do they have many medical records in the Thai hospital, but also some prescriptions collected by concubines. Inedible. They come and go again and again, and they collect more medicinal recipes. Therefore, although they are not very good at diagnosing the pulse or prescribing prescriptions, when it comes to medicinal diet to regulate the body, the imperial doctors in the imperial hospital may not be able to compare with them. Manbao received a hand-copied encyclopedia of medicinal foods from Dr. Lu. This name was chosen by Manbao, because none of the medicinal foods in it had been categorized, and the records were very complicated. They were all collected by Dr. Lu herself. Transcribed. Manbao flipped through a few pages and didn't have time to read it in detail, but Yang Hesha's situation can be recuperated by taking medicinal diet, and it won't hurt the body. That's great. After hearing this, Mrs. Tang immediately said, "Give me a share too." Manbao was curious, "Magistrate Tang is also sick? I think his rosy face doesn't look sick." "Bah, bah, bah, childish words, the strong wind blows away," Mrs. Tang said, "I'm prepared for any danger." Kui pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Brother-in-law is always in better health than husband." Mrs. Tang and Manbao were never polite, and asked, "Is there any prescription for us to recuperate our bodies?" Manbao asked, "Which aspect do you want to adjust?" Mrs. Tang sighed and said, "You know, my son is not young anymore. I always wanted to have another child, but I haven't been able to conceive for the past 2 years." Kui pricked up her ears to listen. Manbao said, "It's normal not to be pregnant, Tang County Magistrate is so busy." Mrs. Tang stretched out her hand and patted her on the head, "How can you get married in the future?" Manbao snorted and said, "I'm sure I can get married, don't bother you." Kui coughed lightly, and asked with a blushing face, Man Bao, can you show me? She has been married for nearly a year, and there has been no movement. Man Bao said that there was no problem, so the three of them slowly left the front team and rested in a side courtyard next to the garden. This was originally a room for guests to change clothes and rest. The servants who followed behind immediately went in to spread the cushions, set up a brazier, and the room was warmed up in a short while. Man Bao took off the cloak and handed it to the girl. He glanced at the white snow in the garden, and saw the red plums reflected in the snow from a distance. With a cry, she immediately supported the window that the girl was about to close, and looked out. Surprised, and said, Mrs. Tang, you still have plum blossoms in your house. Keek scanned it and found that the species was very different from the species in their world, so he suggested Man Bao to include it. Mrs. Tang, it's just red plums. Do you need to be so happy? Close the window quickly to let the wind in. I want to see the flowers for a while. Kui added, I heard that you like to eat venison. My husband and the others have set up a grill in the open pavilion in the garden. Later we can eat roasted venison while enjoying plum blossoms. Man Bao almost narrowed his eyes, and said with a partial mouth, that's so embarrassing. Mrs. Tang smiled and said, you still feel embarrassed, come and show us quickly. Man Bao went over to feel their pulse. In fact, both of them have some problems with palace cold, especially Kui Shi, her cold air is relatively severe, so it is difficult to conceive. Man Bao explained their problems, and then said, it's not very important, I'll prescribe a prescription for you to take later. Madam Tang can take a few doses of medicine, Madam Kui, you need to drink for a while. Madam Tang turned her head and asked Kui Shi, have you seen it at your house? Kui frowned and said, I asked the doctor to look at it, but they all said that the problem is not serious. Man Bao thought she was worried, and immediately comforted her, it's okay, it's just that it's not easy to conceive, and it's not incurable. If you are worried, I can give you an injection for a few days, and take medicine, and it will be almost cured in a month. It's just that you have to take medicine for a period of time later. Kui Shi knew that she didn't understand Madam Tang and her words, so she didn't explain. She smiled and nodded, then I'll help you, and you don't have to go to my house. I'll look for you later. She smiled and said, don't you have a room on the second floor of Jishi Hall? Man Bao was very pleasantly surprised, you are willing to go to Jishi Tang to see a doctor. See you tomorrow, sleep, good night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1303. No wonder she was pleasantly surprised, since she came to the capital, these wealthy families, regardless of men or women, do not like to go to the pharmacy to see a doctor, no matter whether it is serious or minor, acute or chronic, doctors have to go to their homes for consultation. If it's for privacy, she doesn't think it's necessary at all, because when the doctor comes back, the servants will take the house to the pharmacy to grab the medicine, and the doctor in the pharmacy can tell what disease he has even if the visiting doctor doesn't tell him. Not to mention that some difficult and miscellaneous diseases have to be identified with the people in the same room, so as not to prescribe the wrong prescription and cure the wrong disease. Go home to see a doctor, walk around, who in the whole house does not know that you are sick? The few companies that saw her saw the doctor knew it. Basically, as soon as she entered the door, the whole family knew about it, while some people were loose-mouthed. As soon as she left the front foot, the patient's disease on the back foot could spread to the street. If you ask her, the confidentiality of outpatient visits is not high. If you want to keep it a secret, go into Jishi Hall and sit on the second floor. If your illness is really secret, you can ask the doctor to prescribe a few more prescriptions. Let's go down, let alone the people at home and on the street. Even the doctors in the hall can be fooled. Most importantly, it saves them time. I don't know if you need to run around in a carriage to make a doctor's visit. Do you have to walk a long way when you get off the carriage? For example, in the Imperial Palace, it takes half an hour to walk from the gate of the palace to the East Palace, and then from the East Palace to the Taiji Hall. How much is half an hour enough for her to do? Man Bao held Kui's hand, and said with sparkling eyes, "Mrs. Kui, just because you are willing to go to Jishitang for medical treatment, it will be cheaper when I ask the shopkeeper Zhengde to calculate the cost of the medicine for you." Kui Shi, thank you. Is she short of money? Tang He and the others had already sat down in the open room, which was surrounded by bamboo curtains and a thick layer of felt cloth outside. In summer, the felt cloth is removed, and only bamboo curtains are placed, which can block some mosquitoes and let in the wind, so people can sit comfortably in the open pavilion. In winter, put down the bamboo curtains and hang felt cloth to block the wind. Because they wanted to enjoy the snow and plum trees, the felt cloth and bamboo curtains facing the plum trees in the open house were rolled up. They sat by the brazier with a table next to it, and their own servants waited on them. With cut meat barbecue. Sitting cross-legged on the low couch, Tang He stretched out his hands into the brazier for warmth, and then breathed out comfortably. It's still comfortable at home. Yang Hesha shook his head with a smile. Yin sat beside Bai Erlang quietly, and also sat cross-legged on the low couch that belonged to him. Someone brought tea and put it on the small table beside his hand. The table was very small, and could only hold a plate and a teacup. Tang He and Yin laughed and said, "It's a bit shabby, Mr. Yin, don't mind." Yin Yu bowed slightly and said, "Senior, you're being polite, I won't." Tang He raised his eyebrows. "By the way, you are also studying at Kuazi Academy now, so I am really your senior." Then he turned his head and said to Bai Shan Bai Erlang, "Don't always call us adults, just call us seniors together with brother Yin." Bai Erlang and Man Bao are not very picky in making friends, but Bai Shan is very cautious in making friends. Since he brought Yin Yu here, he obviously thinks it is possible to make friends. What's more, after they returned to Beijing, they all heard that when the king of Yizhu left the capital, he left behind a killer. I heard that Yin Yu was there at that time, and these young people lived and died together. Yang Hesha didn't talk much, Tang He did most of the talking, Yin Ju didn't talk much, and his expression was reserved at first, but after listening to them talk for a while, his expression gradually relaxed. Yang Hesha took a sip of tea. Bai Shan glanced outside and asked, "Where did Man Bao and the others go?" Tang He was aware of the details, raised his eyes to look at him and asked, "Are you engaged?" Bai Shan blushed slightly, but his expression was still calm. He said, "Her parents are not in the capital." Tang He said, "Then doesn't she have a brother? Just decide and forget it." Yang Heshu is the parent officer of Lujian County, but he knows how much the old Zhou family loves Zhou Man. Hearing this, he said with a smile, "I'm afraid her brothers dare not be the master, and they can't." Bai Shan nodded, and said, "As a matter of course, we are still young, so it is natural to be serious about getting engaged." Bai Erlang was very curious, "Have you mentioned this to Man Bao?" Bai Shan shook his head, "No. He just said, he has been with them all the time, and he never heard them talk about it." Bai Shan glanced at him and said, "It's called tacit understanding, do you understand?" Shirajiro. Tang He burst out laughing when he saw this. Yang and Shu couldn't help laughing out loud, even Yin He pursed his lips into a smile. The atmosphere suddenly relaxed. Tang He relaxed even more, and leaned directly on the low couch and asked, "When the time comes, I will send you an engagement gift. What do you want?" Bai Shan asked, "We won't return to Beijing until the beginning of spring next year. Will Senior Tang still be in Beijing by then?" Tang He nodded and said, "I have entered the Ministry of Punishment, and I will not be released for the time being." pointing to Yang He again, but he is not necessarily sure. Yin Or looked up and asked softly, didn't Senior Yang enter the household department? Yang Hesha said with a slight smile, I have little qualifications and want to be released for a few more years, so the household entry department is only temporary. I will release it when there is a suitable position outside. Bai Shan nodded approvingly, the capital is so big, there are too many people, and the water is too deep, so it's hard to do anything. It's more fun to go out and govern the people. Tang He was drinking tea, and raised his head in surprise when he heard the words, how old are you, why do you think about these things? Bai Shan said as a matter of course, in a few years, I will also take the imperial examination, so naturally I have to think about it early. Tang He shook his head, then turned to Bai Erlang and asked, what about you? Bai Erlang looked at him blankly, me. This is the balance in Tang He's heart, that's right, this is normal. Tang He's eyes fell on Yin Or, and he asked with a smile, what does Junior Yin want to do in 3 or 4 years? Yin Ryu said, take care of your body, if possible, I want to go outside the capital to have a look. He didn't want to become an official or something, he couldn't be distracted, and his body didn't allow it, so he was very happy to be able to go out of the capital for a walk. Tang He nodded slightly, this idea is not bad, it is still planned. Mrs. Tang and the others came from the side courtyard, handed over the stove to the servants, and asked with a smile, what were you laughing at just now, I heard your laughter from a long way away. Everyone's eyes fell on Man Bao in unison, and then Tang He said with a smile, it's nothing, madam, come and sit down. Mrs. Tang looked disbelieving, she glanced at Tang He and said nothing. Tang He looked at Yang Heshu, and Yang Heshu smiled slightly and said, it's really nothing, madam, please sit down, madam, please sit down too. No one believed what Tang He said, but as soon as Yang Heshu said Mrs. Tang and Kui Shi believed it, and then they all sat down with smiles. Man Bao also sat down on the low couch beside Bai Shan, looking at them curiously. Next update around 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1304. Different people say the same thing has different effects, and this is not the first time Tang He has seen it, so he is very open to it. He also graciously distributed the venison roasted by his servants to Madame first, and Madame Tang was very satisfied with this. There are not many plum trees in the Tang mansion, only 6, but they are blooming very well. Last night, there was another heavy snow, and the white snow reflected the red plum trees, which was especially beautiful. Man Bao and Bai Shan ate some venison with them, talked for a while, and then eagerly tried the red plums in the garden. As soon as Tang He waved his hand, they dragged Bai Erlang and Yin Yu and ran to cut plum blossoms together. The servants of the Tang mansion took the scissors and followed behind, and they ran under the plum tree, only then did they smell the faint fragrance. Yin Ryu said, the fragrance of the red plum is light and elegant, it really smells better. Bai Shan walked around among several trees, picked a branch, and pointed it to Man Bao, look at this branch, isn't it pretty? Man Bao looked at it for a while, then nodded. Bai Shan smiled, took the scissors from the servant, and tiptoed to cut them. Bai Erlang also found a branch that he thought was particularly beautiful, and invited his friends to watch it together. Yang Heshu got up and stood in the hall and looked at them. He waved his hand slightly, and the servants in the open hall immediately put down their work and quietly retreated, standing far away. He said, you also heard just now that they are going back to their hometown, and they will not come back until after the year of birth. The crown prince's acupuncture has to be stopped until she comes back. If so, do you still go to Dali Temple? Tang He drank the tea in his hand, got up and walked to him to look out, and sighed, I want to stay in the Ministry of Punishment, but I can't make the decision alone. The criminal department is mainly in charge of major local cases. With his qualifications, the criminal department is mainly responsible for the review of various local cases, or occasional business trips to handle suspicious or important cases. Like the cases in the palace and the capital, most of the people in the Ministry of Punishment and the Dali Temple will take care of them. But it's different when you enter Dali Temple. Dali Temple mainly investigates the cases of officials and royal families. Although Tang He himself is not too afraid, deep down in his heart, he really doesn't want to get involved. Yang Heshu also didn't suggest him to get involved. He looked condensed and said, "Let's think of a way, there is still room for Renshu to be written." Tang He looked at him, "Do you think you can leave Beijing?" Yang Heshu remained silent. Madame Tang and Madame Yang behind them were drinking tea quietly, as if they didn't hear what they said. Tang He sighed and said, "I heard that Yang Shivo also wants you to stay in the household department." Yang Heshu frowned, "No, I can't stay in the household department." His father Yang Houi had worked in the household department for 8 years before, and there are many old friends there, although he will be promoted very quickly when he enters. But he is so young, there is no need to be promoted so quickly, he does not need to stay in the household department at this time, he has his own plans and steps. He raised his chin slightly, motioned him to look at the 4 teenagers in the distance, and asked, "Can you take care of these 3? Tang He turned his eyes to look at Bai Shan and the others, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, they don't have a foundation in the capital. I don't know what's going on, but His Majesty knows it well, as long as they don't harm others, nothing will happen." Yang Heshu nodded slightly, "I'd like to remind you later, it's best for them not to participate in the matter of seizing the heirloom. If Manbao wants to see a doctor for the crown prince, he should just see a doctor." Tang He took it for granted. The two looked at the sky that was gradually darkening again, guessing that it was going to snow again, and couldn't help sighing in their hearts, "The mountain is about to rain and the wind is full of the building." Mrs. Tang and Mrs. Yang, who were sitting in the back, looked at each other, and then frowned slightly. After returning to Beijing, they really consumed a lot more attention than the place. Manbao and the others came back after cutting a branch of plum blossom. Tang He looked at it, and unceremoniously picked among the 4 branches, and then picked out one to pass to Mrs. Tang. "How about in the house?" The branch he picked happened to be cut by Manbao. Seeing her stare, Tang He said confidently, "There are only 6 trees in my house, and you cut 4. If I cut it again, will it still be a plum tree?" Then he turned his head and wrote to Yang He, "You also pick one to go back." Yang Heshu picked the one in Bai Shan's hand, and also took it to Mrs. Yang, "Go back and put the bottle in the study." Bai Shan. Tang He clapped his hands and said with a smile, "That's all right, 1 branch per family, just right. Bai Shan, you should have said earlier if you want us to help you prune the branches. We will definitely choose better looking ones for you." Who doesn't know who, Tang He didn't think they were polite just now, shook his head and smiled, "This is very good." Bai Shan and Manbao turned their heads to look at the plum blossoms in Bai Erlang's hands, and then at the plum blossoms in Yin Or's hands, so they secretly encouraged Yin Or to exchange with them. Yin He didn't have any objections, but Bai Erlang didn't like them questioning his aesthetics very much, so he refused to change it, thinking that the plum blossoms he cut were the most beautiful in the audience. He said, "I'm going to take it back and put it in a bottle, and put it in the study too, on the shelf behind my desk." He emphasized the placement of the plum blossoms, and then gave Yin Or's plum blossoms a contemptuous look, thinking that his plum blossoms were far inferior to his. Yin Or smiled and nodded to express his recognition, and then said to Bai Shan and Manbao, "He is not willing to change." Bai Shan and Manbao couldn't resist him, so they could only admit it with a sigh. Qi comforted her in Manbao's mind, "In this way, it will be more logical for you to go back and trim the branches for collection." Manbao felt that this was true, so he was not so worried. Knowing that Yin might not be considered an outsider, Tang He, Yang Heshu and Bai Shan didn't have so many scruples when talking to Bai Shan, and reminded them directly, just keep in touch with your classmates. After you leave, the capital may not be peaceful. Bai Shandao, since we're not here, what does the Teju have to do with us? Tang He smiled and said, it seems that it doesn't matter, but it takes some time to see the effect after some things are done. How do you know that the unrest during the Chinese New Year will not last until you come back in the spring? So from now on, you better be careful. Yang Hesha said, some powerful people like to bury their threads for thousands of miles. The current peace may not be real. His gaze skipped over Bai Shan and landed directly on Man Bao. Actually, the most worrying thing is not Bai Shan, but you. He said, Bai Shan has the Imperial College behind him. Although Kong Jiju is not very reasonable in the court, he will definitely not let the students in the school suffer wronged in vain, but behind you there is only Jishitang. Man Bao thought for a while and said, there are queens and princes behind me. Yang Hesha shook his head and said meaningfully, you can't have a prince behind you, but you can have a queen. Man Bao was confused, aren't the queen and the prince on the same team? Yang Hesha, you have to change the word, forget it, anyway, just remember that the prince is the prince, and the queen is the queen. Let alone Man Bao, even Bai Shan is confused. See you at 9 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1305. What should I do if I don't understand? The four of them pressed their questions to the bottom of their hearts at the same time. One decided to go back and ask his father, and the three decided to go back and ask their husbands. Of course, Yin asked his father not to tell the whole story. He just asked his father directly when he went to pay his respects, Father, what is the difference between the queen and the prince? This question was endless and very ambiguous, but Yin Li understood what he wanted to ask at once. He looked up at his son, thought for a moment and said, the Empress is the mother of the country, and she is devoted to the public. Almost the same as His Majesty, the prince is the prince. Yin understood it, and he was a little puzzled, isn't your Majesty afraid of your relatives? Yin Li smiled and said, my wife is a relative who has selfishness. But the queen didn't, she was clearly awake all the time, and the best thing was that the emperor had a good relationship with her and trusted her, so they could be a husband and wife. Husband and wife can be one, but father and son may not be of the same mind. The conflict between the emperor and the prince was better a few years ago. Although there were occasional disputes, the emperor generally admired the prince also admired the emperor. But in the past few years, the conflict between the father and son has become more and more acute. As the third prince grows up, the emperor loves the third prince more and more, and the prince's temper becomes more and more violent. Not only the relationship with the emperor, but also with the courtiers difference. As a close minister of the emperor, even if Yin Li is a pure minister, it is impossible to say that he is not worried, especially when he is still in such an important position as Jingzhe Yin. He is in charge of the law and order in the capital. There are only 2 generations in this dynasty. It is not like he doesn't know how he came to the throne now. Yin Or's question obviously aroused his worries. He sighed, couldn't help but rubbed his forehead and asked, why do you think of asking such a thing? Yin shook his head, but did not tell Yang and Shu what they said. Yin Li didn't ask any further questions, just said, don't meddle in this kind of thing, just study hard at school. Yin may agree. Yin Li also explained something to Yin Or, but Mr. Zhuang didn't even explain. When the 3 children asked for advice, he told Man Bao directly, just remember that you are just a doctor, the queen is your patient, and the prince is also yours patient. He drew a circle in front of them with his hand, and said, the female family members of the rich and powerful families in the capital are all your patients. They will pay for your visits. It's fine to ignore personal affairs in the past few years. After a pause, Mr. Zhuang said, on this basis, people should be kind to each other. For the rest, just follow fate. When Mr. Zhuang said so, Man Bao decided to listen to him and let everything go. But if you think about it carefully, she seems to have been doing everything according to fate. Bai Shan didn't ask any more questions, but he kept the question in his heart. Occasionally he would think about it when he was free, and he didn't know when he would be able to figure out the answer. However, the three of them were indeed more cautious than before when doing things outside. Even when Man Bao went to the palace to teach Dr. Lu, they were also more kind to the internal eunuchs and maids who were the subjects of the test when they tried the needles. Some needed medicinal materials are given to some people in urgent need. For example, a fellow villager of Eunuch Wu's apprentice, a father-in-law surnamed Chen, he was in a miserable situation. Before he came, the brochure said that he had fallen, but Man Bao reached out and found that he had a high fever, obviously contracted a cold, the whole face was pale. I heard from him that it was because his legs and feet were inconvenient after the fall, and he didn't dare to ask for leave, so he braved the cold to clean. As a result, the injuries on his waist and legs were still not healed, and he contracted the wind and cold again. If he can't be cured again, he will be thrown into the epidemic prevention station to wait to die. Man Bao took pity on him, so he took 2 sets of medicine from the medicine box and gave him an injection to reduce the fever. And like him, there are many palace maids who have to take medicine but can't take medicine. Man Bao can also pick the most important 1 or 2 gangs, and they can only figure out the rest. However, they all thought about it very openly, and felt that being able to have needles was much better than before. And as long as Man Bao enters the palace, Eunuch Wu must be the leader to take her to the side courtyard, and he must also be the first person to diagnose the pulse. Not to mention, after 10 days, his complexion has improved a lot, and his back is not so curved anymore. The prince smiled slightly when he saw it, and said to him, "It seems that acupuncture is really beneficial. You only have acupuncture and do not take medicine, and you have so many benefits." Eunuch Wu immediately bowed and praised that it was all because of the benevolence of the prince and the benevolence of the queen. The prince said quickly, "We only have such a small number of people in the East Palace. How can they test needles? Since they can't stab bad people, and they can really cultivate the acupuncture skills of Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao, then we should also select some palaces from other palaces. Come here, anyway. Dr. Zhou has to enter the palace every day during this time." Eunuch Wu paused and then responded in a low voice. Of course, the crown prince didn't bother to do it secretly. When he went to visit the queen in the evening, he happened to meet the emperor there, so he said, "I heard from Dr. Zhou that the doctors outside are slow to learn medicine because no patient is willing to give acupuncture to novices, and some doctors have to learn acupuncture for 4 or 5 years before they can get started, but now Dr. Lu and the others can find the right acupuncture points and perform acupuncture by themselves after learning for a while. Queen, don't you want to train more medical girls? Why don't you hire more palace maids? Anyway, they won't hurt people, and they can also benefit, and it's cheap for both of you." This was said to the queen, but it was also said to the emperor. The queen glanced at her son, then nodded and said, "I will ask someone to arrange it later. Since the administrative office is arranged in the East Palace, let's put it there for now, and there is no need to move the place. Dr. Zhou will come into the palace to give you an injection, also convenient." The emperor didn't take this trivial matter to heart, but looked at the queen amusedly. "It's been more than 10 days, and your concubine's hospital is still running." The queen didn't want to stare at him in front of her son, but said, "Your Majesty, prepare the money." The emperor waved his hand generously and said, "Don't worry, the harvest in Huangzhuang is good this year, and my private treasury is full. The main reason is that he did not marry a daughter this year, nor did his son marry a wife, and he did not build another palace. Although the queen mother went to some birthdays, he also earned some money when he raided the Yizhu palace, so the two sides offset the money in the private treasury. Many The emperor felt that he had quite a lot of money, but it turned out that less than 20 days later, Bai Shan and the others finally wrote out the plan for the imperial medical office. Because Bai Shan and Bai Erlang were going to take the exam, Man Bao was in charge of copying it. She specially made a thick booklet for copying, which can be as long as 2 desks when pulled out. After finishing writing, give it to Mr. Zhuang to read. After spending 3 days, Mr. Zhuang finally read it before going to bed. Then he praised them and walked around twice excitedly. However, he calmed down and decided to talk to them in detail tomorrow. There is no way, he has been staying up late for the past 3 days, and he can hardly keep his eyes open. Bit by bit, he woke up with his excited admiration for them. So he suppressed the words he was full of, and whispered to the 3 of them, "Okay, I've finished reading it as a teacher. I'll talk about it tomorrow if you have anything to say. You must be very tired after the exam. Go and rest first. See you at 11 o'clock. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1306. The eyes of Bai Shan and the others could hardly be opened, but at this time they heard the praise from their husband. They still tried their best not to let their eyelids droop. He asked, "So sir, do you also think that our method works?" Of course it doesn't make sense, but he has seen the hard work of the 3 people for more than a month, so he first praised them as usual. "It's well written, and you can write such a book with reference to the Imperial College. It's amazing, I dare to think about it." Seeing that their eyes could hardly be opened, Mr. Zhuang waved his hand and said, "Okay, we'll talk about these things tomorrow, you guys go to bed first." So the 3 of them went back to the room to sleep with their eyes half closed. They slept soundly, but Mr. Zhuang couldn't sleep. He lay on the bed thinking about the notes they wrote over and over again. Of course he knew that they were learning how to write the table, and also learn the rules. It seemed that they wanted to run the women's hospital well. He was the one who suggested referring to the Kuazijian's suggestion, but he didn't expect them to think in such detail. Comprehensive. Although there is a high probability that this suggestion will not be adopted, no, it will definitely not be adopted, but one can think about it, and the ability of the 3 children can be seen from this booklet. Mr. Zhuang is very satisfied with this. Their growth has greatly exceeded his expectations. Thinking about this, Mr. Zhuang couldn't fall asleep for most of the night. He didn't fall asleep until the cock crowed. Early the next morning, Bai Shan and Bai Erlang, who had just finished the year-end exam, got out of bed, but Man Bao got up yawning and went to the clinic. Today she does not stop bathing. Man Bao sat at the table and had almost finished his breakfast. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang came to the table. She said, "Today I'm going to talk to Mr. Zheng about going back to my hometown. The luggage at home is also being packed. You guys, do you need to buy anything else? I can bring it to you when I come out of the palace." Bai Shan shook his head, expressing that all the presents he wanted to buy were sold out some time ago, and there was nothing to add. He just asked, "Are you going to the palace today to give the Empress and the Crown Prince an injection?" Man Bao nodded, "Yes, I'm leaving tomorrow. Today is the last time I enter the palace, let me say goodbye to them by the way." Bai Shan pointed to the study room and asked, "Then when will you give our booklet to the Queen?" Man Bao thought for a while and said, "Give it to her later, just so she can take advantage of the New Year's Eve to take a look." Bai Shan and Bai Erlang didn't think there was anything wrong. After all, last night my husband said they wrote well. So Man Bao went out with the booklet. She went to Jishatang first, and mentioned the matter of returning to her hometown with the shopkeeper Zhengde. Man Bao had mentioned this matter to shopkeeper Zhengde a long time ago, and shopkeeper Zhengde also agreed, knowing that she was leaving tomorrow, and thinking that she would invite her to a restaurant today to see her off. But Man Bao declined, because she was very busy. She would go to the palace in a while, first give the crown prince an injection, then give the queen an injection, and give the things she wrote during this time to Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao, especially Dr. Lu. Dr. Girl, she has a lot of homework assigned to her. After hearing what she was going to do this day, shopkeeper Zhengde was dumbfounded and said, "Your schedule is too tight, why do you need to finish it on this day? Wouldn't it be better to stay for 2 more days?" Man Bao shook his head, "The crown prince will not give leave, the journey is far away, if you stay here for 2 more days, you have to stay at home for 2 less days, no, no." Shopkeeper Zhengde glanced at the lobby, and then said, "Why don't you go into the palace now? I don't think there are many patients today, do you have any patients who need to be referred?" Man Bao said, "There are 2. You can go after reading those 2, and let Dr. Ding and the others share the rest for you." Man Bao was very happy to have a little more time, so he agreed with a smile. After Mr. Zhuang woke up, washed up, had breakfast, and led Bai Shan and Bai Erlang into the study, he was about to take out the booklet and explain to them the shortcomings in detail, when he realized that Man Bao had written the booklet. It was taken. "Mr. Zhuang." Mr. Zhuang was silent for a while before asking, "Are you going to be sent to the palace?" Bai Shan nodded, "We're leaving tomorrow, Man Bao happened to be entering the palace today, so he brought him in. Is the presented item easy to come by?" Mr. Zhuang looked at the hourglass, heaved a sigh of relief, and said, "The booklet cannot be handed in. It would be a joke if you hand it in. You go to the front yard and ask someone to go to Jishatang to get the booklet back. By the way, tell Man Bao, don't rush to tell the queen about this matter." Bai Shan was puzzled and asked, "Why? Your paper is like re-establishing an imperial medical office. It involves a lot. Although the proposal is well written, it is absolutely impossible to be adopted. Since you know that it will not be adopted, and you are not courtiers, why bother to submit it to others?" Bai Erlang couldn't help but said, "But that's not what you said last night, sir. You also said that we wrote well." Mr. Zhuang nodded and said, "The proposal is written well, but it's good, but it doesn't mean it will be adopted." Bai Shandao, but referring to the Imperial College was also suggested by Mr. Mr. Zhuang nodded, and said with a smile, "I gave the reference according to your assumptions. Your writing is indeed good, but I didn't say anything. You can submit it according to what the Imperial College wrote." Bai Shan understood that what they had done for more than a month was actually just a coursework, not a mature idea that could be discounted. He sighed, stood up in disappointment and said, "Okay, I'll go get it back." As a result, when he arrived at Jishatang, shopkeeper Zhengde told him that Man Bao had left for more than a quarter of an hour. Bai Shan frowned, and chased after her before he had time to say more, but he still couldn't catch up. When he arrived at the gate of the imperial city, Daji drove out in his car. Bai Shan sat on Lu Gui's carriage and looked at Daji in blank dismay for a while, then turned his horse around and went home. Mr. Zhuang was also startled when he heard that. He turned his head to look at the hourglass, and first asked, "Is the hourglass broken?" I couldn't help but look outside the door again. The position of the sun is indeed not very high. Bai Shandao, I went back and asked the shopkeeper Zhengde. The shopkeeper Zhengde said that there are too many things to do with Man Bao today, so he let her enter the palace in advance. Man Bao's entry into the palace is different from that of other wives. Other wives need to make an appointment, but she can enter at any time. Even if the crown prince and queen are not free after entering, she can also ask Dr. Lu and the others to assign homework. Nothing is wasted. So it was such a coincidence that they missed it? Bai Shan asked, "Sir, what should we do?" Mr. Zhuang thought for a while and shook his head and said, "It's okay, just submit it if you present it, and make a joke if you make a joke. Anyway, we will leave tomorrow, and we don't care about the ups and downs." We will go there when we return to Beijing. It's been a month, and the palace is also busy during Chinese New Year, so maybe the Empress has forgotten about it by then. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang thought so, so they felt relieved. In the end, none of them expected that the Empress read it with gusto after she got it, and she didn't finish reading it. She took it out and shared it with the Emperor that night, and said, "I think their suggestion is good." The Emperor also read it with great interest, but he just read the excerpt as if it were a storybook. When the Queen said this, he almost fell off the bed. Ask for a monthly ticket. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1307. This booklet is very long and the characters are not large. The Emperor only read 2 pages, which is just the beginning for this booklet. But just at the beginning, the Imperial Medical Administration's discussion written on the booklet listed several key points, and its scale was comparable to the current Imperial College. Although he didn't take a closer look at the back, the Emperor glanced at it and knew that it was impossible. If he really wanted to reform the Imperial Medical Office like they did, not to mention his private treasury this year, next year's private treasury would also have to be set up go in. So the Emperor really only read this book as a storybook, especially this book was written by 3 teenagers under the age of 13 or 14. The Emperor coughed, put away the notebook and said solemnly, "It's getting late, Ching Ching, let's sleep." It was rare for the Queen to hear this pet name, so she couldn't help but look up at him and asked, "Your Majesty, you won't go back on your word, will you?" The Emperor coughed lightly, held her hand in a fawning manner, and said, "Zitong, even if we want to build a women's concubine hospital, we have to make a long-term plan, don't we? Otherwise, we can just build one like the current concubine hospital, but I think this is a rough idea. It seems to be rebuilding the Imperial Medical Office, and even the current Imperial Hospital will be changed." The Queen nodded slightly, and said with a smile, "I was shocked when I saw this book, but I haven't read it yet. Why don't we read it first?" The Emperor struggled and said, "Shuyi is well written. I heard that these 3 children have written a biography outside, which is also well written. But this article is well written, but it may not be applicable to the court." The Queen nodded and insisted, "Let's read it first and then discuss it." The Emperor looked at the Queen's expression and was always a little uneasy. He felt that the next time Zhou Man went to the palace for an injection, he must have a good talk with her. This kind of notebook can be divided into several times. Why do you have to write so many at one time and write it in such detail? And before writing, shouldn't you discuss it with the superior? Before Wei Ji scolded him every time, he would show an unhappy expression to let him know in advance. The Emperor planned this way, but when he strolled to the East Palace the next day, he found out that Zhou Man hadn't entered the palace today, and their family had already left Beijing to return to their hometown. The Emperor, who was entangled all night and wanted Zhou Man to take the initiative to take back the notebook with the Queen. When the prince heard that his father was coming, he hurriedly came out from the palace to welcome him. After saluting, he couldn't help being curious, why did the father come here? Since the master was not found, the Emperor could not turn around and leave. He raised his eyes to look at the scenery of the East Palace, and said with a slight smile, "I'm passing by, so I'll come in to see you." The East Palace is on the east side of the Taiji Hall, and the Emperor's office is in the second entrance of the Taiji Hall. He has to go to the first entrance, and when he comes out, he has to go down a long step, and then walk through a long corridor. Only after crossing a large open space can we reach the gate of the Eastern Palace. And this is already the second entry into the East Palace. He can't go anywhere but here. The prince believes that he is a ghost. But the prince didn't show it. Since his father came, he led him around. The Emperor did not come to the East Palace very often before, but in the past 2 years he has been less frequent, and every time he came, he heard that the prince gathered people to drink and fight in the East Palace. There are very few opportunities to walk and talk quietly like this. The emperor walked around the East Palace, nodded in satisfaction, and asked, "Didn't you drink any more recently?" "Yes," the prince said, "Joe Man said that drinking is not allowed yet." The emperor nodded and said, "You still have to listen to the doctor's words. Now, how do you feel about your health?" "Thank you, father, for your concern, my son is much better. As long as there are many, Joe Man has left Beijing, who will get your injections in the future." The crown prince said, "For now, let's stop, wait for her to come back and continue." The emperor frowned. How can the treatment be stopped? Could it be that no one else knows the acupuncture she wants to do? Yes, it will, and Joe Man also suggested to let Dr. Lu come, or to teach Xiao Yuanzheng, but the crown prince still trusts her more. So he said with a smile, Chen is not in a hurry, just wait for her in a month, and now I only need to get the needle once every half a month, which is much better than before. The emperor didn't think so. Heirs are very important, especially the heirs of the crown prince, so he said, then she shouldn't be allowed to leave the capital, let her stay in the palace and recover from her illness first. The prince said, the queen mother also agreed, and said that she is young and homesick after leaving home for a long time. We can't stop her family from reuniting. The emperor sighed, your mother is too soft-hearted, that's all. I will ask Xiao Yuan to come over to see you later. Even if the acupuncture cannot continue, the medicine cannot be stopped. The crown prince didn't object, so just watch it, how to treat it is not up to him. If Joe Man and the others hadn't left the capital, the emperor would have wanted someone to chase them back. He would have a headache just thinking about facing the queen when he went back at night. The emperor secretly planned to get up, or go to another palace at night. As a result, he was called by the queen mother before he could implement it. When he was stopped on the way to the concubine's palace, the emperor changed his mood and went to see the queen mother with a calm face. The queen mother's health was much better, and she was supported by Princess Yunfan to sit down at the dining table. When she saw the emperor, she smiled and waved, and said, our mother and son have not eaten together for a long time, let's have a meal together tonight. The emperor responded with a smile, stepped forward and poured a bowl of soup for the queen mother himself. Princess Yunfan stood behind the queen mother and served. The emperor smiled when he saw her. Yunfan, sit down too, the whole family doesn't need to be so polite. The queen mother laughed and said, she doesn't eat here. She turned her head and smiled at Princess Yunfan, you go back to accompany your mother, I will talk to your uncle Huang. Princess Yunfan responded in a low voice, bowed and retreated after saluting. The queen mother watched her disappear, and said to the emperor, Yunfan has grown up and is much more sensible. The emperor nodded. The queen mother sighed, I know how to be filial, she is the one who takes care of me when I am sick. The emperor immediately said, the queen mother likes girls, how about letting Chang Yu and the others come over to accompany you to relieve boredom tomorrow? Queen mother, I didn't say that your daughter is not filial. The queen mother was a little tired, and said directly, Yunfan is not young, I have chosen a family for her, it is the son's family in Weizhou, what do you think? The emperor kept his expression on his face, but he was racking his brains thinking about which family the Sun family in Weizhou was. After thinking for a long time, the emperor said with some uncertainty, Chenzhou Governor Sun Chiyuan seems to be from Weizhou. The queen mother nodded, from the same family, Sun Chiyuan is still the third wife. I have taken a fancy to the eldest grandson of their eldest son. That child is also studying. I heard that he is not bad. The queen mother didn't know any Sun family before, but since she was selected, she naturally had to check it out, so she knew. The emperor asked, what does the Sun family mean? Next update around 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1308. Even if you are a princess or princess, You have to ask the opinion of the man's family when you talk about marriage. The marriage will be given only after both parties have no problems. Otherwise, the marriage will be given indiscriminately. Woolen cloth? The Queen Mother nodded and said, their family agreed. When the emperor heard it, he had no opinion at all, and asked with a smile, does the empress want my son to marry me, or you? Give it to you. This is also an attitude, but the heart of the Sun family. But this time the Empress Dowager came to the emperor to talk not about the marriage, but she looked up at the emperor with a kind expression on her face. Emperor, Yunfan married to Weas, who is already a low marriage. I checked, and no one from the Sun family is an official in the court. No matter what Wulang has done, Yunfan is the emperor's grandson. She has already wronged her in this regard, so she can't be too wronged in the dowry. Emperor, it is impossible to ask the state treasury to pay for it. Even when his daughters were married, the courtiers sprayed back the dowry he listed too much. In the end, if he wanted a richer dowry, he had to pay it from his private treasury. Originally, if nothing happened to the king of Yizhu, Li Yunfan got married, and the emperor rewarded some dowry, the treasury would still pay out, but now the Ministry of Households would not give money, and the Queen Mother obviously knew this, so she asked the emperor directly for it. Naturally, the emperor would not go to the household department to do useless work, so in the end he had to get it out of the private treasury. He felt that today's dinner was very unsatisfactory. If he knew it, he might as well go to the Queen for dinner. Although they are all thinking about his private treasury, the feeling is different. The emperor was heartbroken, but nodded with a smile on his face, and said, after the Queen Mother makes an order, the minister will ask the inner treasury to prepare a generous dowry for Yunfan. The Empress Dowager smiled, and looked sideways at the maid who was at the side, and the maid immediately presented a note. After she took it, she handed it to the emperor, and said with a smile, this is a dowry that I roughly drafted. You can take a look at it first, and then add it when you look back and see what is missing. The emperor didn't expect the Queen Mother to even prepare this. When he opened it, his heart was full of thunderstorms. He glanced at 10 lines and couldn't help frowning. Queen Mother, is this dowry too generous? The Queen Mother sighed and said, it is not necessary to be so rich. We should choose people like the Wang family, Kui family, and Wei family. If the dowry is less, it will be less. But now that we marry her to a remote place like Weizhou, the Sun family will not be able to afford it. I don't have any fame, and if I don't accompany her with more things, I feel uneasy. The Queen Mother pressed the corners of her eyes, and said sadly, your younger brother is now left with only one son and one daughter. I just hope that they can live in peace and prosperity. The emperor was silent. Seeing that he didn't speak, the Queen Mother took his hand and said, Cat slave, do you still remember that when you were young, the 4 of you brothers played together, Saburo and Goro were naughty, and your elder brother was serious, and it was you who led them to discipline them, let them hide from your elder brother, and always stand in front of you when something goes wrong. How good is your brotherhood at that time? You were caught by your father when you did something wrong, and you patted your chest and said you would protect Saburo and Goro, and your elder brother also protected you in turn, and in the end it was your elder brother who was beaten by your father. The emperor's face was a little moved. He was silent for a while, and then said, don't worry, Queen Mother, I will not treat Yunfan badly in terms of dowry. You give me the booklet, and I will take it back for the Queen to arrange. Only then was the Queen Mother satisfied. She pushed the soup bowl with a smile and said, this is the old duck soup that I asked the small kitchen to stew. It's cold, eat something to keep out the cold. The emperor smiled, thinking that this bowl of duck soup was made of gold. After the emperor finished his meal, he also talked with the Queen Mother for a while, then took the booklet and got up to leave. Seeing the emperor standing still outside the palace, Gu Zhong stepped forward and asked nervously, which Empress Palace does your Majesty want to go to? The emperor glanced at him and said, When did I say to go to another palace? Go back to the Taiji palace. Gu Zhong was silent in his heart, and he didn't know who said he wanted to go to the harem after finishing his work. Gu Zhong served the emperor back to the Tai Chi hall. The queen had already changed clothes and was lying on the bed, still holding the handbook written by Man Bao. Apart from dealing with palace affairs, she spent most of her time reading this book today, and she hasn't finished reading it yet. When the emperor came back suddenly, she was stunned for a moment, then she got up and greeted him with the booklet, and asked with a smile while saluting, "Why are you back, Your Majesty?" The emperor took off his coat and threw it to the maid, and said sullenly, "It's about to go to bed, so I'll be back naturally." He glanced at the booklet in the queen's hand, couldn't help sighing, and shouted outside, "Gu Zhong, bring the booklet from the queen mother." The emperor motioned the queen to take a look, and said, "It's too rich, I have to find an excuse to say no." Even if he is willing to give Li Yunfan a generous dowry, there is no need for such a generous dowry, and there must be a bargain. But when the queen mother suddenly brought up their childhood, he couldn't refuse at that time, so this villain either had to do it by the queen, or he had to do it under the order of the inner treasury. After changing his clothes, he sat cross-legged on the couch, and said very unhappy, "Xiao Yuan is saying that the mother is recovering from a serious illness, and her body is still very bad, so I can't be angry." The empress didn't read the scriptures, but she got a clear idea after scanning the 10 lines at a glance. She asked, "When does the Empress Dowager want to set the wedding date?" "Not sure, but I guess it will be next year or next year." The queen thought for a while and said, "It should be next year." Seeing that the emperor was distressed, she smiled and sat opposite him. "Do you know that the queen mother is a little dissatisfied with Yunfan's meddling in some palace affairs?" The emperor frowned. "What kind of palace affairs did she interfere with?" "It's nothing, it's just that when Zhou Man treated De Lang earlier, she deliberately asked someone to pass the news to the queen mother, which made the queen mother very dissatisfied." The emperor set his eyes on the booklet. "So this shouldn't be all for Yunfan," said the queen. "Back then, Wei Ji copied all the Yazhu palaces and didn't leave them a penny. In the future, when Zinking wants to fief the land, he must bring some things with him." She said, "Dizhu is poor." This fiefdom was chosen by the emperor. He coughed slightly in embarrassment, and argued, "Actually, it's not very poor." The queen smiled and said, "I didn't say that this fief is not good, but with Zinking's status, the Ministry of Household and the Ministry of Industry won't give him too many things when he goes to the fief, but should not be realized, they are all treasures that can be passed down to the family." The emperor stared. "Are you asking me to agree?" The queen said, "It's better than asking you for money, food, and people. These porcelains, calligraphy, and paintings, furniture, and decorations can all support the appearance and live, but it is difficult to realize them. Obviously, the queen mother has carefully selected them, and did not touch the sensitive points of courtiers and emperors. It's a pity that she didn't know that the emperor also loved money, and he wouldn't even give this little thing." Seeing his wandering eyes, the queen couldn't help frowning. According to the calculation, these things were confiscated from the Yazhu palace, and they were dragged to your private treasury because it was not easy to cash them in. "Why, they are not there now." The emperor felt a little guilty, and whispered, "Isn't Sanlang going to Luozhu? There is nothing in his palace, so." The next update will be around 9 p.m. I remember that the emperor's nickname was Cat Slave, right? Coincidentally, the last time Gu Wanyan asked me the name of the harrowing cat in The Coroner of the Tang Dynasty, I blurted out the word cat slave. Book lovers who like to solve crimes can read Gu Wanyan's The Coroner of the Tang Dynasty. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1309. Queen. She couldn't help but reached out and grabbed the flesh on his waist and twisted it. The emperor quickly explained, I didn't give it all to Saburo. He loves calligraphy and painting, so I gave him some calligraphy, painting, and decorations. Changio is not young anymore. I'm going to say goodbye right now. There are 2 sets of furniture that are good. I have already told her, Mingda's health is not good. I plan to give her the painting of a long crane and those precious medicinal materials. It's just such a coincidence. He glanced just now, and basically all the things he had divided up were on this booklet. These things are not easy to cash out and are expensive, so they are basically used as rewards in the warehouse. Some are not very valuable, and will be rewarded to the ministers in the future, such as some cups of jade and so on, but such very expensive paintings, furniture, decorations, etc. are basically for personal use. Of course, the emperor himself didn't need so much, and he doted on his children, so he naturally wanted to give it to them. The king of Yazoo was favored in the past, and the queen mother often gave him things, and even asked the emperor to give him gifts, so the things that were finally sent back to the inner library were very valuable. Of course, there are more good things than these. There are all kinds of precious brocades, furs, and even a whole tiger skin. A lot of things were sent to the emperor, from the crown prince to the little princess who can run and dance. He has always been very loose with his own children. Some time ago, the queen was ill again, and there were many princes and princesses who came to pay their respects. He rewarded everything he met here. It's just that these more expensive and bulky things are reserved for a few more favored ones. Because the Empress Dowager was still ill, the emperor was afraid that she would become emotional when she saw the scene, so the things for Changio and the others were not moved out, and the things for the third prince were quietly moved out. The queen looked at the folder in her hand and asked, "Is everything delivered?" The emperor coughed lightly and said, "I have already said that I will give it to the children. As a father, I can't break my promise and get fat." The queen frowned. It's a step backward for the queen mother. Xiao Yuanzhang said not to make the queen mother angry. "Why are you doing this?" The emperor said unhappily, "I didn't expect the queen mother to ask for so much dowry, and she even made a list. It's just a niece, just use those things from the private treasury as a dowry." However, the queen mother remembered her childhood, and when he thought about it, there were only the fifth brother and a pair of children left behind among the brothers, so he felt a little regretful at this time. The emperor looked at the empress anxiously. The queen pressed the booklet and sighed, "Forget it, I'll go discuss with the queen mother, exchange some things. You ask someone to give me the list in the private treasury, and I will pick similar things and replace them." The emperor felt distressed again. Those are all good things. Changio and Mingdan need to use them when they get married. The queen said, "They are not in a hurry, even Changio will take another year or two. But money and food can be earned, and these good things are accumulated, and cannot be bought with money." The emperor would rather give some gold and silver to his niece at the moment. The queen glanced at him and said, "Would you like to take a closer look at Zhou Man's notebook?" She put the thick booklet in the emperor's hand, and said, "I have read most of it, and I think it is really good. If the Imperial Medical Office is really built according to this, it will benefit countless people." Hearing what she said, the emperor unfolded the brochure and asked, "I glanced at the back last night, and it seems that medical offices are going to be built in various places." The queen nodded. "This can't be done overnight, but the Imperial Medical Office is not completely without precedent. The Imperial Medical Office had the ability to teach in the early days of the previous dynasty, but it was slowly abandoned later." The emperor didn't say anything, but he was more careful when he read the book again, but he was still very worried. "In this way, my private treasury will definitely not be enough. If I ask for money from the national treasury, do you think the Ministry of Household Affairs will agree?" The queen said, "Don't you give it a try, Your Majesty." The emperor thought for a while and said, "I'll take a look first." The queen smiled, and the emperor felt that the Ministry of Finance would not agree, but it was just that he didn't want to do it. When he wanted to do it, he wouldn't think it was a problem. He has always been like this. He procrastinates on things he doesn't want to do, and is extremely impatient about things he wants to do, wishing he could finish them all in a day or two. The book was written in great detail, and the more the emperor read it, the more he felt that the Imperial Medical Office looked familiar, and he felt even more heartbroken. This is completely based on the Imperial College. The Queen smiled and said nothing. It's not that I just found out today, didn't I know it last night? The emperor looked at it and said, when Zhou Man comes back, I must have a good talk with her. The Queen smiled and said, you read the excerpt first, then we can talk about it. Although the emperor disliked it very much, he did look a little more seriously when he looked at it, and began to think about it. Man Bao and the others who had already left Beijing had already forgotten about Jizi. They packed their things early in the morning and set off for their hometown. Of course, not everyone went back. There were also servants on Changqing Lane, and Aunt Rong was left in the capital. Xiang's family didn't leave either. Xiang Mingxiu's leg no longer needed needles, but he had to continue his rehabilitation, so he decided to stay in the capital. Then Saturday Lang, who stayed behind, took Zhou Lijun and Zhou Lizhong to see them off, and Yin or other classmates who knew their departure date also came to see them off. It was really a crowd. Not only the classmates came, but also students from other classes of Kuazixu and Taixu. There were 20 or 30 of them. Man Bao stood aside, almost not recognizing everyone. Shopkeeper Zhengda also came to deliver Man Bao, and gave her a lot of emergency medicines, such as cold, fever, cough and other medicines. Although Man Bao was prepared, he accepted them all because of the large number of them. It took less than half an hour to bid farewell, and it took Bai Shan almost all his strength to bid farewell to everyone, pulling Bai Erlang into the carriage. After the car got out for a while, he complained to Bai Erlang, it's all about the biography you wrote, otherwise there wouldn't be so many people coming to see us off, and so many words. Bai Erlang was not convinced. I am not alone in this biography, how can it be blamed on me alone? Bai Shan, but the name is only yours. If you are capable, return the money given by the bookstore to me. Bai Shan stopped talking, and Man Bao, who was sitting between the two of them, smoothed things over. Okay, aren't we leaving now? It's only been delayed for half an hour, and the master didn't say anything. The two of them stopped arguing. The roads are not easy to walk in winter, and I am afraid that the carriage will slip, so I have to slow down a bit, and the carriage will appear to be more bumpy when I slow down. The three of them sat in the carriage and couldn't help going out for a ride. This time they brought their beloved horse with them. Although it was cold, they didn't ride fast, and it felt good to run forward. When he was tired from riding, he went back to the carriage to rest. Seeing how energetic they were, Mr. Zhuang shook his head and smiled. The next update will be around 11 o'clock in the evening. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1310. Man Bao's 13th birthday was celebrated on the road, but she was young and didn't need to spend it. It was just that Jojo Lang made her a bowl of noodles early in the morning and cracked 2 eggs in it, just like in previous years. However, she felt that she was 1 year older and was very happy, so she and Bai Shan Bai Erlang rode to the front of the team. Daji rode behind them with 2 guards. Now that they had run away first, they might as well stop in the county town ahead, and they could book an inn for them, and take a stroll around the local streets by the way. Because the carriage is always slower than the horse, but this time when I return to my hometown, I have more time to play than the last time I went to Beijing. They first went to the Bai family in Longzhou to worship their ancestors. Mrs. Lu had no intention of staying in Longzhou, so she sent her servants back early to tell her to clean up the room. When they arrived, they didn't even unload their luggage, so they sent people to prepare for the sacrifice that day. The next day, he led Bai Shan to visit the ancestral grave. Bai Erlang went with him, and because Man Bao was Zhou Yin's daughter, Mrs. Lu invited her to go with her. Zhou Zhoulang and Zhou Wulang met a few local merchants with the steward of the Bai family. After bargaining, a batch of leather goods was sold. On the third day, she rested for a while. Mrs. Lu only asked someone to send an annual gift to my family as usual, and apologized that she couldn't come to visit because she had to travel. When the people from the same family came to the door the next day, they had already left the city on the road again. Man Bao didn't understand this, and asked Bai Shan quietly, "Grandmother Lu seems to be hiding from people in your clan." Bai Shandao, when we left, grandmother and the clan had an ugly quarrel. When we left, grandmother said that unless I honor the lintel, I will never have any further friendship with the clan. He said, in the past when we went back to our hometown to worship our ancestors, people from the clan either came to trouble us, or looked at us coldly. We are used to being indifferent, so we don't want to spend too much time dealing with them. Man Bao frowned, "Why are they so bad?" Bai Erlang said, "My father said that money touches people's hearts." Bai Shan nodded, "My family is a side branch, the ancestors are still good, and there are few heirs, and they have accumulated wealth over the years. If they were weak, they would have been swallowed up by the people in the family. However, every generation of my family has people who can become officials. People on the side dare not go too far, so the wealth has been accumulated." Bai Shan had memorized the genealogy a long time ago, and Bai Erlang had memorized part of it too, but now he had almost forgotten it, so he told them like a story. How should I put it? Although Bai Shan's fate is ill-fated, at least one of them will become an official in every generation. Regardless of the distance, in the past 100 years, his great-uncle was the state shepherd of the previous dynasty, and the two families had a good relationship, so his great-grandfather temporarily sheltered their branch after he died in the war. It's a pity that his great-uncle's family also died in the war. As for his grandfather, he stepped on the line from the previous dynasty to the current dynasty. He just became an official in the previous dynasty. Within 2 years, the previous dynasty was gone, so he was replaced by Dajin as an official. Died. However, it was the time when the world was initially settled, and grandmother Liu's natal family was strong. Although the Bai family was jealous of the wealth they had accumulated, they did not dare to go too far. Grandmother Lu was also stubborn, she kept most of her assets in a daze, and managed well, her assets were increasing. Originally, Bai Qi showed his talent, and after passing the Jinshi examination, the family became more polite to their family, and even bought back some of the villages and shops that had been occupied by various means before. Who knew that Bai Qi hadn't been an official for 2 years and died again? The last time Bai Qi's father died, he was still quite a few years old, and he had already shown his talent for reading. This time, Bai Shank was only in his early 1-year-old, and he was just able to walk while holding onto the wall, so he didn't see any good at all. Therefore, if he dies, their branch will be cut off. According to the rules of the clan, their family's property will be returned to the clan for redistribution. At that time, no one knew exactly how much property Bai Shan's branch had, but everyone calculated it in their own hearts, and felt that it was only a lot more than the few houses of the direct branch of the family. Because their family's property has not been divided for 4 generations. The accumulation of 4 generations, plus the dowry of the married daughter-in-law. So there are many people who are overtly and secretly moved. However, Bai Shan was well protected by grandmother Lu, at least those poisonous and other insidious methods would not be used on him, but grandmother Lu was very distracting. After she blocked the poisonous snacks on the plate again, Bai Shan was pushed directly to the rockery in front of the teacher in the school, his head was hit with a hole, and a lot of blood came out. This completely angered Mrs. Lu, and it was also this time that Mrs. Lu began to consider moving out of Longzhou. She chose again and again, and finally chose Master Bai in Mianzhou. There is no way, her father and brother have both passed away, and now her nephew is in charge of her natal family, which is already separated by one floor, and her natal family is too close to Longzhou, and there is no way to separate the Bai clan. Not to mention Zheng's family, her stepmother is the head of the family, and the real married daughter splashed the water, so she chose, and found that Bai Li was the most suitable. The two of them have a good relationship, and Bai Qi and Bai Li studied together since they were young, and they didn't separate until Bai Qi decided to go to Beijing to study and take an exam. The second reason is that Mianzhou is far enough away that the clansmen in Longzhou have no roots there. In the past, when Bai Shan was young, he only felt that he was very unhappy in Longzhou. His classmates all targeted him, and his husband didn't like him. When he went out as a guest, everyone liked him. But after the Zhu King case was settled, Mrs. Liu had a careful talk with Bai Shan about the family affairs, and he realized that the water, snacks, and meals he had to go through so many procedures to arrive when he was a child. In his mouth, this made him dislike Longzhou even more. Mrs. Liu didn't like it either, so this time she decided not to stay longer in Longzhou. She left in 3 days, and sent posts and annual gifts to my family on the last day, just to avoid meeting them. Bai Erlang and Man Bao were dumbfounded when they heard that. Bai Erlang clicked his tongue and said, "These things in your family can almost be written into a storybook." Bai Shan glanced at him and said, "This is your family too." After Bai Erlang thought about it, it was true that although they moved to Mianzhou and separated their genealogy, they were still connected with Longzhou. After all, they only separated for 3 generations, and they still kiss each other. Man Bao asked, "Have you ever thought about dividing yourself into clans?" Bai Shan quietly looked out and said in a low voice, "I thought about it too, but my grandmother didn't really think about it." Man Bao and Bai Erlang asked in unison, "Why?" Bai Shandao, grandmother said that if the world is peaceful, it will be divided, but if the world is not peaceful, it is better to be united. Man Bao said, "But now the world is peaceful." Bai Shan lowered his voice and said, "Let's talk about it when the next emperor ascends the throne. The previous dynasty has only been passed on for 2 generations. Who knows if there will be another fight? See you tomorrow."